Turning back to our coverage of today's high-stakes summit, President Trump has raised some eyebrows with his decision to allow Russian President Vladimir Putin onto a U.S. airbase in Alaska. In the past, they've only met abroad, and for good reason. CBS Evening News co-anchor John Dickerson explains why the location for these meetings has a lot of significance.
In parts of Alaska, Russian Orthodox churches still stand, their onion domes a reminder of that earlier reach. That might sound like ancient history in the light of the events bringing leaders of those countries to Anchorage, except that Vladimir Putin justifies his invasion of Ukraine by citing the history of the 9th century. The war that bled Russia, leading to the 19th century sale, took place on the Crimean Peninsula, the location of Putin's 2014 start of this war. Diplomacy usually unfolds in the courtyards of capitals, under chandeliers where the marble floors are polished by centuries of careful footwork. In Alaska, the marble is still in the ground, jagged and unworked, like the present diplomacy. Hard-edged, slogging work, little room for ceremony. The chosen venue keeps up the tension. A meeting meant to project cordiality is being held at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, whose fighter squadrons intercept Russian aircraft that regularly test U.S. airspace. For decades, Alaska was derided as Seward's Folly, a barren expanse bought on a whim. Then came the gold, the oil, and the strategic advantage, an unexpected payoff that fuels the hope, however slim, behind today's meeting, that geography might be destiny, and that a gamble against all expectations can yield something that looks like wisdom in hindsight.
Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan is also in Anchorage for the summit. She sat down with Alaska Republican Senator Dan Sullivan and discussed what's at stake today and why he thinks Putin is coming to the negotiation table. Listen.
Vladimir Putin's being brought in from the cold. He's been isolated by the world for a reason. Do you think that this is rewarding bad behavior by giving him this spotlight on the American soil?
Vladimir Putin is coming to negotiate with Trump because of the sanctions. Don't take it from me. Listen to our European allies who are definitive on that. The reason Putin is even doing this is because of the threat of serious secondary sanctions. So I think that that is important. And, you know, in terms of American soil, look, I actually think Alaska's the appropriate place. Putin understands one thing, as you know, Margaret, strength and power.
All right, for more context, let's bring in former National Security Advisor, General H.R. McMaster. He's also a CBS News foreign policy and national security contributor. So, yeah, General, I don't know. This is Putin's first time on U.S. soil in nearly a decade. And as Margaret pointed out, he's been isolated from the world. He's considered a war criminal. He's coming to the negotiating table now. I understand what the senator is suggesting. But those sanctions, we've had sanctions on Russia and Vladimir Putin specifically in place going back to the Obama era. I mean, you know, these guys, Lavrov's been there for 20 years plus. Do sanctions and an American democracy where we, you know, have elective change every 4 years matter to Vladimir Putin?
Vlad, hey, it's great to be with you. Yeah, they matter a lot to Vladimir Putin. And that long history of sanctioning Russia, and you're referring to the sanctions that the Obama administration put on after the first invasion of Ukraine in 2014. So it's important to remember this is a 21, you know, I mean, an 11-year long war that's going on in Ukraine now. And they've affected Russia in a very negative way, especially after President Trump's first term, when he put more sanctions on Russian entities and individuals in 1 year than the previous 8 years of the Obama administration. And he kind of hit him where he hurt at that time, too. Remember, he closed 2 consulates and expelled scores of Russian undeclared intelligence agents. So Trump, he's still driven by this desire, you know, to bring Putin in from the cold, to have some kind of an entente with Putin. At the same time, he's been pretty tough on Russia for Russian aggression, not rhetorically, but in actions.
But so then, okay, so what would I know what the president has signaled that he wants. He wants a ceasefire and ultimately a peace deal. But Doesn't strike me that the Russians are prepared to do that. They're not even prepared to meet with Volodymyr Zelensky, who Vladimir Putin views as illegitimate. He won't sit down. He's happy to sit down with the president of the United States, the most powerful man in the world. Of course, that's a great photo op for him, but he's not willing to sit down with Zelensky, who he thinks is illegitimate. And what would be the point of ending the war now if he actually gets nothing out of it?
Hey, Vlad, I mean, this is the most important point, right? Is that Vladimir Putin has in mind objectives that go far beyond anything that's in reaction to what we do, from sanctions relief to some sort of, Putin tries to expand like the topics that are on the table, so he can obfuscate what he's really trying to achieve in Ukraine. And as you mentioned, his objectives go far beyond Ukraine. It's important to kind of maybe revisit this essay he supposedly wrote in July of 2021. Just a few months before the massive reinvasion of Ukraine. And in it, he's nostalgic, for the Russian Empire, and he wants to restore Russia to national greatness. Putin is a man who's obsessed, Vlad. He's obsessed with restoring Russia to national greatness, and by doing it, and to do it by dragging everybody else down. And I think it's important to recognize that, Putin won't stop in his aggression, not only against Ukraine, but, he's waging kind of a broader shadow war against Europe overall, cutting undersea cables, blowing up warehouses. He put out a hit on the CEO of Rheinmetall, a big defense firm. So it's important to recognize how expansive his objectives are and that he won't stop until he is stopped. And I think that is going to have to involve, and this is probably what's likely going to develop over the next few months, is to impose costs on him that convince him that he cannot continue the war against Ukraine at an acceptable cost and risk.
Okay, let me switch gears, General, and ask you about the marking of the 4 years since the Taliban takeover of Kabul. Talk about the impact of the Trump administration's actions taken against Afghanistan and against Afghan allies.
Well, the big mistake, Vlad, was reversing the president's strategy for South Asia that he announced in 2017. I tell that story quite extensively because it was foundational to kind of my experience as national security advisor. And in 2017, I think President Trump approved the first reasoned, long-term, and sustainable approach toward Afghanistan and South Asia broadly. Sadly, he abandoned that because the people got in his ear with the kind of end the endless war mantra. And of course, what they were objecting to is a massive U.S.-led war, but almost didn't seem to realize that, hey, it was the Afghans who were bearing the brunt of the fight on a modern-day frontier between barbarism and civilization. And I believe that strategy was sustainable and was working in 2018, in 2019. The big mistake, Vlad, and this might have echoes of what we're seeing a little bit in Alaska, was to negotiate with the Taliban without the Afghan government present. So you know what that did, Vlad? That delivered a psychological blow to the Afghan government. And then we delivered blow after blow against them in terms of reducing our support for them, not actively targeting the Taliban anymore, reducing intelligence and air support and logistics support. And so you know what the Taliban did? They just went to core commanders, this is now under the Biden administration, and to Afghan officials and said, okay, hey, here are your choices. You can either accommodate with us or we'll kill you and your whole family. And so war is a contest of wills, Vlad, and it's almost as if in this period of time across two administrations, Trump and then the Biden administration, presided over that disastrous and deadly and humiliating withdrawal from Afghanistan under this idea of like, when did it ever make sense, Vlad, to evacuate the military before civilians? I mean, it was like we were creating a hostage crisis. So it was an utter disaster. And I think what's relevant to what we're seeing today in Alaska, Vlad, is it had obviously humanitarian consequences. It has counterterrorism consequences in terms of our security, but it had big geostrategic consequences because, Vladimir Putin was watching this and he thought, hey, I can get away with it. And I think you can draw a direct line between the withdrawal, the humiliating withdrawal in Afghanistan and deadly withdrawal in August of 2021 and the massive reinvasion of Ukraine in February of 2022.
Brilliant analysis as always, my friend. Thank you very much. General H.R. McMaster, we appreciate it.
Hey, great to be with you, Vlad.